Here we go. Good morning. Today is Friday, February 16th, 2024. 30 a.m. and it's the meeting intent at Rico's Clean Energy to smart work bill F-215. Big regulation of wetlands are recorded development and dam safety. We have been revising on a daily basis, and we are going to be going through draft 6.1. With council, good morning, Mr. O'Grady. Thank you for bringing us a new version of the bill. If you could take us on for, thank you.
So this is Mike O'Grady, legislative council, we shut draft number 6.1 from you with a date stamp of 2/15/24 and the time stamp 6:35 p.m. The first thing I want to note is that previous drafts had annotation indicating what has changed, what remained an issue. This one has different annotation. There's yellow highlighting for changes that have been edited from draft 4.1 and gray highlighting from unedited changes from draft 4.1. There was a 5.1, but the editors basically edited 6.1 partially last night. And then there's bold text for questions that remain. I tried to use blue highlighting, but it was basically opaque. And so that's why I'm using bold instead of blue. Second major thing is that the bill has been reorganized. The river corridor section, which was the second major component of the bill, is now the first major component of the bill. And that was at the direction of the chair. And then the third significant change is that there's a short title that's added on page 1, lines 7 through 10. The act is now going to be known or cited as the Climate Change Response and Resiliency Act.
So we were talking about that way since CCRR. Finally, we actually put it in the bill.
It's
really what a climate response resilience.
Should I move on?
Yes.
Section 2 is the new findings. For purposes of time, I'm not going to read through them. But basically they reference several different studies or reports regarding the effect of climate change on the world and specifically Vermont, increased rain events or annual precipitation, the damages from floods, and similar information. So that leads you to page 3, section 3. One of the changes here from lines 13 through 15 in the requirement that DEC do initial education and outreach regarding the impending permitting requirements for development of river corridors. They will be also consulting with and collecting input from environmental justice focused populations, Environmental Justice Advisory Council, etc.
So, no, I would make it that it's intended that our education outreach mapping work would include those populations, but based in part on having our vision with Ms. Franklin D. And I think it was been better to be explicit about it than implicit.
So moving on at the bottom of the page 3, line 21, you'll see a change to the date for the report back from DEC regarding education and outreach. And this report change is the first change in the timeline for river corridor permitting. So the education and outreach timeline remains the same, 25 to 27. The report back from DEC is now 27 instead of 26. The rules will be developed by 29, and then the permit will be required in 2030.
So I would just say, so rather than discuss it in detail, it's obviously a big change. I'd say the reason that I'm putting this forward for this is based on more information from the agents on the ability of even an enhanced data and safety program and an enhanced recorder program to get the work done in a way that they felt they could, I just say that they could do the job well. And so we can take much slowing on it, but I'll put 30 more seconds of editorial. So for 4 years, I did project management work, and there's not so much value when the people who have to do the work tell you they can't get it done, and you keep a timeline that is going to have them miss deadlines, have the satisfaction of naming earlier dates, not necessarily meeting. So now some of them say, well, we can apply resource and money to move earlier dates. But I think that's a conversation to have. But I took suggestions from the agency about the dates thought they could make with the bill as draft in terms of resourcing time. And we can adjust both those variables, but they need to be adjusted together.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm personally not happy with the change to send dates further out. And, you know, I don't represent the agency. I represent Weston, Ludlow, Plymouth, Cavendish, Chester, all the places that were deeply affected by the flooding. And I don't think it's an appropriate timeline for us to push it out that far. It sounds like you don't want to discuss this as a policy question right now, so I will refrain from making any more comments, but I would not be voting for this bill with this timeline at this point.
Okay.
So I just note that like the Lake Shoreland permitting process, that took 4 years. And it's exponentially more land that you're dealing with here, more communities that you're dealing with here. And the education and outreach program for Shorelands took 2 years, and this is what Shorelands never had to do was write rules. Because you wrote into the statute the level of degree that was needed in rulemaking for Shorelands. And that took 3 years, overlapping with the education and outreach program. You're gonna have to have a pre-rule years, that's gonna be pretty vigorous, gonna take a long time. The rulemaking is probably gonna take at least 2 years. So I'm not opining on the timeline that's been proposed, but it's gonna take more than.
Mark, yeah, let's do a couple quick comments and then let's go on because we've only had Mr. O'Grady for 45 more minutes. I'd like to walk through.
As the senior member
Time
of,
for this guy.
as the senior member of the Windsor Village, I am going to assign Senator Wellington explaining this to Westwood. I'm behind you 100%. Mark, how long did it take between construction of the American fleet at Pearl Harbor and VJ Day? How long did that take?
836 days.
1436.
13.
And still more than 3 years.
A little more than 3 years.
About 45 countries and almost 40 million men
Right.
and women.
What most?
Later in December, but 7 to the match.
All right, well, thank you, Mr. O'Grady, for that. Legislative, institutional knowledge of past, previous complex rulemakings. Just one that is gonna engage something in the order of 45,000 parcels. Ms. Phillips, I would like to comment and then we'll move along.
I'll be brief. Lauren Oates, the Nature Conservancy for the record. I don't know if it's a friendly amendment or maybe just an additional consideration on the timing is that this isn't a new rule. This is an existing state rule. It is an expansion of that rule, which.
It is not the same rule. It is definitely not the same rule because the current rule is only for development that's exempt from municipal regulation. This will be for all development. It is entirely different rule.
And then an additional comment would just be that the agency, through their rivers program staff have been working on trying to get towns to implement and adopt municipal bylaws that do the same thing for over a decade, and it has not been sufficient. So there's been ample education and outreach that's been taking place trying to enact exactly what this bill is doing. So this wouldn't be, while it is new and it is significant, it is not something that has not been attempted by the agency through different mechanisms already.
And so, Ms. Smith, and then we'll go back to reading.
Hannah Smith with the Agency of Natural Resources, just in response to that, I think that, to Ms. Oates' point, this has been an effort that will take substantial additional effort by the agency to actually implement, given the outreach that's happened and the difficulty that municipalities have had in implementing the same regulations over River Corridor Bigfeld.
Okay, so thank you everyone for a little bit of other things to think about. And let's continue, and then we will, of course, have time to.
Page 4, there's going to be a report back on public education and output. You're gonna submit that report to you and now to the Environmental Justice Advisory Council as well. And then there is going to be page 4 in that report, lines 9 to 12, an analysis and summary of the state permitting of development and map requires on environmental justice populations. You can skip ahead to page 6, lines 8 through 10. This is when the Secretary A&R is directed to adopt the River Corridor Rule, which is January 1, 2029. On page 7, line 11, there had been in a previous draft regarding delegation of this permitting program to municipalities, a condition that they adopt a river corridor bylaw. But later on, in a subsequent section, you take away their ability to adopt river corridor bylaws because the state is going to now be regulating in the river corridor. So there will be rules. The rules are going to address how there's going to be delegation. Maybe there is an opportunity for delegation, but A&R will be the one that will specify what ordinance or bylaw would be necessary to the purposes of delegation.
With the anticipated transition.
Right. Then let you go to page 9, top of the page, lines 1 through 3, 1 through 4. That is when a permit will be required under the new A&R River Corridor rules, beginning of January 1, 2030. And I want to stop and say that these rules will not just be for development in the river corridor. They should be for development that's exempt from municipal regulation in the flood hazard area. Because in order to maintain an NFIP compliance, the state has to regulate development within the flood hazard area in some way. And municipalities cannot regulate certain types of development because they do not have that authority. So you need to maintain the rules for the purposes of exempt from municipal regulation, but it will also be for all development in the river. Now moving on to page 22.
So we're,
Most of the other changes are just technical. between here and 22.
No, we had discussed some changes throughout that section in our previous walkthrough, so I guess I'm good.
Which section?
I mean, I'm just trying to keep track because I think what I'm learning is that there were changes made that we didn't discuss as a committee prior to this draft, so I just feel a little bit behind, but I thought we had discussed a few things with the shells and the mays.
Oh, that has changed, I thought we already went over that, but that is on page 11, line 11. Any municipality with a municipal flood hazard area bylaw or ordinance shall update their bylaw or ordinance to incorporate the state flood hazard area standards. So they have to do it, but and if they don't, on or after January 1, 2028, those flood hazard area rules become the state minimum flood hazard area standards that FEMA is gonna now, in their process, require municipalities to meet. And if a municipality doesn't, then if a municipality under the NFIP doesn't meet the state minimum standards, then that municipality is technically out of compliance. And then FEMA starts its non-compliance process, which can take a couple of years, but the first thing they do is they increase the insurance rates in the municipality for flood insurance in that municipality. And that usually inspires the municipality to act because of it hits the pocketbook of everybody that's in the flood hazard.
Okay,
It seems like that's always been the ultimate leverage of FEMA.
So, and then there is another shall and two shall, one on page 14, one on 15. So the strategies that municipalities shall take underneath their ability to regulate for flood resilience shall include adoption and implementation of state flood hazard area standards. And then similarly on page 15, in that the Shorelands Authority content of bylaws that municipalities shall adopt. It shall include and require compliance with the state flood hazard area standards. And then that takes you to and on 22, this is the transition and timing. Again, there's that it's a restatement that the secretary shall initiate rulemaking no later than January 1, 2027, and that the rule shall be adopted on or before January 1, 2029. Clarifying what happens between now or whenever this act is enacted as January 2030 is that you'll see that on last night's report, even prior to the effective date, the Secretary of Natural Resources shall continue to implement the flood hazard area river corridor rule as the rules existed on July 1, 2024 for development exempt municipal regulation flood hazard areas and relevant river corridors. So it says relevant river corridors, it's for those that have adopted that river corridor bylaw. Presently, remember, you've heard that only 10% have done so, etc. Do you have any questions here? Should I move to the next major change?
That's a good one.
Page 25 is the next major change. You're now in the wetlands sections. And you're at the top of, you're in the requirement for the update of the non-significant wetlands inventory layer. And I believe this was DEC, I think it was DEC, maybe it was agreed to by advocates, but there had been language that that layer, the most significant wetlands inventory layer would have. Anything for municipalities that municipalities had consultants map. And what is being clarified is if it's otherwise unmapped. It gets included on the layer. If it's already mapped, it doesn't need to be. Yeah. And I, just from my knowledge of South Burlington, they have their own wetlands. They're on the map, they're on the months, if you will, it's very map. So.
Are you gonna have enough contradiction?
That's really kind of one of the purposes of this is to have. An updated uniform mapping system that will include those municipal map wetlands. So that so anyone, developers, homeowners, whomever, will have the ability to have one resource. So on page 26, there are changes to, it's really, I think, from my perspective, just clarifying how the ratio is going to work, the 2-to-1 ratio is going to work, and also how they're going to quantify the impacts that 5,000 square foot impact on wetlands. So let's just read this language. I think it's just helpful for context. So page 26, line 6. The amount of wetlands to be restored, enhanced, or created shall be calculated at a minimum by determining the acreage or square footage of wetlands permanently drained or filled as a result of the permitted activity, and multiplying that acreage or square footage by 2 to result in a ratio of 2-to-1 restoration to wetland loss. So it's not any adverse effect, it's when they're permanently drained or filled when the 2-to-1 ratio is applied.
Okay.
Well, the vocabulary, what do we mean by restoration? Where there was no wetland?
So
No
there,
wetland?
you can do that. You can restore a wetland with the proper management. Takes time, but you can restore a wetland that previously, so things like you take out the drainage part that would be there. You put back in the hydrophytic vegetation that had been removed, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there are ways. Kareem is probably the best one to tell you how that's done, but it can be done.
Are there enough suitable sites for this to work?
Well, yes, and that's part of this bill is, requiring a more careful look at those sites. Karina Daly, for the record with BNRC, a more careful look at on-site mitigation. To, restore the impacts to the wetland in the area where they were. Where the impact was proposed. And if we can't do that on site, then we can do it within the same watershed. If we can't do it within the same watershed, then we can pay into the inland feed program. And restore somewhere nearby. Also within that same HUC, that was our HUC 8 conversation.
Thanks.
So on page 26, line 12 and 13, you'll see that adverse impacts to buffers shall be compensated for based on the effects of the impact of the wetland function. And then going down, the rules at a minimum shall be revised to require an applicant for a wetland permit that authorizes adverse impacts. So if it doesn't if it's not going to adversely impact, you don't have to do what is filed. To more than 5,000 square feet of wetlands to compensate for those effects of restoration, enhancement, or creation of wetland resources. And then there's a issue of debate between the agency and the advocates. The sentence, wetland, river, and floodplain restoration projects, including dam removal, shall be an allowed use within a wetland under this rule. It previously said shall be exempt from permitting under the rule. Now that might seem like a distinction without a difference to you, but it is not. So when something is exempt from permitting under wetlands rules, that activity doesn't have to engage with the agency at all. When there is an allowed use, that activity or the person operating that activity needs to effectively notify and register with the agency. The concern, from my understanding, is that allowed uses can be applied and applied by different state personnel differently. The people that are implementing the wetlands rules, the staff, sometimes they have different perspectives on what's an allowed use and what needs to be done for an allowed use. And so I believe that's the nature of the debate, because these are river restoration projects and or dam removals, and I think there are those that want to be clear that they don't have to engage with the state agency staff about whether or not it's a river restoration project or dam removal.
So I'm gonna mark it, subject to come back, there's a bigger conversation.
So, but we're keeping it as is.
For the moment, would I highlight it, so requires more time for discussion. When I was sitting for this waiting, the notification from the agency sounded more conservative to me. You would have to speak up, the people would be aware of it, that may be a missed pinch from my part. That was. Okay.
So moving on, page 27, the rules are going to establish a set of parameters of restoration ratios applicable to permanently designed restored wetland restoration projects, including a minimum 2-to-1 ratio of restoration to loss and compensate for drainage. So there's going to be additional parameters and restoration ratios potentially in the rules. And then you'll see the conforming amendment lines 8 and 10 regarding acreage that is affected. And then you can skip ahead to page 34. This is the definition of dam removal. I think you recall that the agency wanted some specificity or more appropriate definition in their opinion. So dam removal means all actions needed to eliminate the risk of dam failure related inundation below the dam and may include partial or complete structural removal.
Mr. Carpenter.
Chair Carpenter, Lake Champlain Committee, for the record. I know we're trying to get through in 25 minutes. I'd just like to flag this for further discussion so we can come back, sir.
Here's my flag.
Thank you, sir.
On page 34, lines 43 through 18, this language used to be struck entirely regarding non-federal dams and which generation. And we thought because the jurisdiction is being transferred to the PUC that you didn't need this language anymore. It turns out that for some of the DEC dams presently, there is generation at the dam, but what the DEC regulates is the structure that's attendant to that generation. And so they still need to maintain that jurisdiction. So because it's being transferred. So it'll now say non-federal dams in which the generation of electric energy is subject to licensing jurisdiction under the Federal Power Act. The dam structure is regulated separately from electric generation shall be under the jurisdiction of the department.
All right, number.
Moving on to the next page, page 35, this was language regarding the records transfer. I don't remember where this came from, probably the agency, but not sure. But it says upon transfer of jurisdiction of the dam from PUC to the department, the PUC transfers copies of all of the records relating to that dam and any other files pertaining to it in digital and hard copy format acceptable to the department that 30 feet installed in jurisdictional transfer. Should I move on?
Yeah.
Page 40 is the CPG, the Certificate of Public Good for DEC issues for a dam, and the issue remains where public safety is listed in the criteria for review of the application for a CPG. You may remember on page 39, Senator Watson had the recommendation to move the public safety out of the list and move it into the lead-in language. So the department shall give due consideration to public safety and among other things, the effect of proposed project will have on the list. I believe it's my understanding that the agency wants public safety to remain listed as one of those components. And either not be part of the lead-in.
Hannah Smith, public safety should be effectively, it is the primary consideration that the dam safety program looks at when they're evaluating a project proposal. So whether that's in the list, I mean, it has been in the list of criteria and it's been considered appropriately, but if the intent is to sort of elevate it by moving it into the intro, I think the effect is the same.
Anyone not content with leaving the spike below in the list, heading public safety?
So moving on to page 41. Remember, you had a conversation about when the engineer is going to be required, who's going to require the engineer, whether or not the engineer's report was going to be approved or disapproved by DEC. So this is language that amends that entire discussion. So for any proposal subject to the dam order, DEC shall require an engineer to investigate the property. So that could be someone they employ, someone they consult with as under a contract, or someone that they require the dam owner to do. And then the engineer conducting an investigation shall be an employee or shall be operating under the supervision of the department as an independent consultant hired by either the department or the project component. So they still are supervising that engineer. You will see page 41, lines 16 to 17, the engineer shall report the engineer's findings to the department. There is no requirement for review or approval or disapproval.
The department has the safety obligation, so it's going to have a report.
Right, and if they want more information, they can require more information.
The department or public?
But this is the department, so the department would be the one receiving the report as part of their order process. And they would be the one that would require more information.
Thank you, Chair Bray. So if I'm understanding this change correctly, we're not moving forward with the independent engineer concept. This is not that.
No, this has that ability.
Okay,
So DEC can have their own engineer, they can hire one to work for them as a consultant, or they can require the dam owner to hire their consultant. But in any of those situations, the language says that engineer is still working under the supervision of the department.
okay, so that does answer the question. If you're in the public and you would like to understand as much as you can, you still have access to this material.
You will be able to access a copy, a record, but as we discussed last week, there's that security information that can be withheld.
Okay,
Page 41, line 18. This is that language that was both duplicative and antiquated, so you got rid of the approval of the governor. And then the language in 1087, which we just reviewed, was duplicative of the directive for the agency to hire or employ an engineer. So what has been proposed is on page 42. The department shall employ engineers to perform the duties required under this chapter to adequately provide for public safety. So they're going to have engineers to implement the program, which they already do. And then in the page 42, line 4, section 1090 on construction supervision. These are changes recommended by the agency, the dam safety program, to modernize the language. Apparently the concept of certification or certifying is not the standard for the language today. So instead of saying that the engineer shall certify that the project has been completed in conformance with regular, they shall provide confirmation to the department that the project has been completed in general accordance with the approved plan. Then thinking with that, maybe it's provided a cross-reference in their input to the actual like standards, the dam safety standards, national standards. So
Does provide confirmation mean something different than certified?
Ben is actually in the Zoom if you want to ask a specific engineering question.
Mr. Green, can you answer that question? And then,
Can you hear me right now?
thank you, good morning.
A question about the certification versus confirmation.
Yeah, do they mean different things?
No, they do not. The problem with certification is that many engineers actually will not provide a certification because in many cases it falls outside the professional liability insurance. So practically, in practical sense, when you a certification kind of provides a greater standard of care than it really is capable of in the industry and what insurance will provide. So when we ask for that, we can't get it usually. So the national standard is switched from certification to the language in here, and that's all we're doing is matching what the national standard is, so we can get project engineers to sign off on projects.
So if they certify something they shouldn't have, their license would be in jeopardy.
Their license and their insurance are in jeopardy.
Yeah, what's in jeopardy if they provide confirmation where they shouldn't have?
Well, I guess if they provide, I get that back. I mean, I guess their license isn't necessarily in jeopardy in that case. If they provide the confirmation, let me answer this question.
Well, for an engineers are still regulated by the Office of Professional Regulation. So their licenses can be reviewed if there are instances where I presume something that they have provided confirmation of does not actually meet the required standards. So they are regulated, their licenses are subject to review by that office if they provide incorrect information to a project.
So you're saying they basically do mean the same thing?
Well, I think that the distinction is that they can't actually provide the certification in some instances because of the insurance that's associated with their license. And that's where Ben's really the expert here. But I think that they cannot provide incorrect information, regardless of whether you call it a certification or confirmation, because of the regulation that applies to their professional practice. The difference in the language is more related to the insurance that's associated with their license.
Professional liability insurance.
Mr. Green, the language change doesn't make the inspection any less rigorous or the confirmation any less careful.
No, not in any way. No, it's just sort of modernizing the language to match. Again, we have, as it currently stands, we have certification. Many engineers actually will not provide that to us now. because of the liability insurance issue where if they provide that certification, they feel it will put their professional liability insurance in jeopardy as opposed to they will. And that's there's a national recommendation in the national guidelines for dam safety. So we're just simply following that in this change.
This is coming from Bridges too, I believe, and other places we have, yeah.
Thank you very much. Let's go on.
Okay, page 42, line 11. Big issue remaining is the liability standard for dam.
This is such a big issue, I want to, when I get to all bold, say this is a bigger conversation than we can do in the moment.
Okay, next change is page 47. It's in the dam safety fund. And what would be eligible under non-emergency funding. The first change here, page 47, line 19. This is really just kind of a technical change relating to that they should provide an operation and maintenance plan. Just to clarify that. And then on page 48, there's alternatives here. I believe the agency and advocates are at odds about when certain activities will be eligible for the non-emergency funding and when they would be eligible for loan subs. You'll see on page 48, lines 6 through 13. This is what I believe that advocates want. They would say to be eligible for non-emergency funding and alternatives analysis, dam repair, rehabilitation and removal options that considers floodplain, wetland restoration, water quality, product organism pathogen, public recreation opportunities, costs shall be completed, whereas the agency wants an evaluation of risk reduction, dam safety, and environmental permitting considerations at the cost. And then for loan subsidies, the advocates want that to be limited to those projects analysis, design, and construction that result in removal of the dam, and the agency is proposing on page 49. Loan subsidy for engineering analysis, design, and construction that result in acceptable risk reduction that will be eligible for loan subsidy. So those are the competing proposals.
Great, thank you for bringing them both in so we can evaluate them side by side. In the words of saying right on what we
Okay, so we're leaving,
both.
okay, is that, okay,
Not voting. Today, so we will choose before we vote.
okay, that's good.
Okay,
Why be exclusive?
Why? I agree.
page 52. This is the requirement of an alternatives analysis. As part of rulemaking, there will be requirements for access to financing and subsidy from the dam safety revolving loan fund, including the requirement that an alternatives analysis be performed by an engineer consultant hired by either the general or the department.
And is there any question about that either way? Right. Thank you.
Moving on, you can go to page 54. This is the study committee on dam emergency. It used to say action, but now it says operations planning. Action planning is something that dam owners are supposed to have. So this is about operations planning. You'll see on page 54, that change is made at 55, the change is made again. And then at the bottom of page 55, there are two legal owners of the dam, one of whom shall own a dam capable of generating electricity. We showed you the one yesterday, there was just one dam owner. And then on page 56, I think it was the agency requested this, that there be an emergency management director or incident commander from a municipality. And this allows for one or more. So that will be, and it doesn't direct who is appointing that. So I think you probably want someone to appoint it. And then that person, whomever that person will be, for entity will have discretion to do one or.
Right, so it's more explicit about the who's involved.
I think you
see, right,
I think you need an appointing authority.
okay.
Should I move ahead?
Yes, please.
Page 58, that's the first petition language. This is, it begins with the statement that non-federal hydro dam without pre-1920 license may be subject to FERC jurisdiction and may require FERC license. As that December 31st, 2024, the PUC, coordination of PEC shall file a petition for a declaratory order from FERC to determine whether projects currently in the PUC jurisdiction fall under FERC's hydro licensing jurisdiction. The PUC shall provide notice to the dam owner when the petition is filed with FERC. So there had been language that hadn't been included, but wasn't debate about whether or not there should be a new sentence that at the end that says basically that the PUC retained jurisdiction until the petitions were acted on by FERC.
Yes.
But I don't know where the agency stands on that.
Hannah Smith, the agency would still like that provision in there. That PUC retains jurisdiction until a FERC determination is made.
Came up yesterday.
I'm sorry,
Came up yesterday.
I think,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, I guess we're not discussing things, but personally, I don't agree with the agency's position on this.
So again, this is all full, so we'll come back to we're gonna do anything.
No, I don't. I think the next change is informative to the discussion.
Okay.
And that is on page 59, lines 8 through 11. The transition for the transfer of jurisdiction. Had previously had the department coming up with a plan, schedule. Based on the hazard classification of the dam, when DEC would assume jurisdiction. That schedule is gone. And it's dead that the department shall assume jurisdiction for all dams, all those PUC dams as of July 1, 2028.
Wait,
this is 2024.
yeah, this is section 24 of one.
That on or before July 1, 2028, DEC shall assume jurisdiction of all dams within the jurisdiction of PUC as of July 1, 2020.
Oh, wait, so can you explain that sentence to me? I don't understand.
So by 28, they have to assume jurisdiction of all the dams that were in PUC's jurisdiction on July 1, 2020.
Okay, so anything that they have that is not under FERC regulation as of July 1st, 2024, they will take by the 20.
That DEC has to assume jurisdiction of.
But if in that time period between 2024 to 2028,
That's the issue that remains.
yes, so what does that section before it do with those dams? They remain under PUC in this current language.
So, no, I would say under the current language, what's on page 59. That it's silent as to what that petition means. It doesn't say that the PUC shall retain jurisdiction if there's a petition that's outstanding.
So who regulates them then?
Well, that's what the language on page 59,
Yeah.
like 9 through 11. Up until July 1, 2028, the PUC is gonna regulate them.
Okay,
And then after that, DEC regulates them. Unless you decide to say there's an outstanding petition that the PUC continues to regulate them. That's what you need
Yes.
to decide,
Yes.
like that last part.
And so I guess I want this is my, can I tell you what I would like, and then I don't know how it's translated? And that doesn't, or if it's in here, I guess I don't fully understand. I do not like the concept that there will be some dams that remain regulated by the PUC because they potentially could be regulated by FERC for that period of time. That's what I would like there to be consistency in who is regulating them. And I understand that that means that there could be a chance that some of those dams in this process get selected or FERC does regulate them. And that's okay, that risk is okay for me. Because that's just how I feel, so that is how the language is currently written, is that? Or is that not how the language is?
You need to make a decision about that, because right now it's silent. It's silent on that, what the effect on jurisdiction is of that petition. In my reading, I would say because it's silent, even if there's a petition on July 1, 2028, DEC takes all of those dams.
Oh, okay, then yeah, then it's okay, then I'm okay with that, I understand now. So we don't need to change anything to have that be the case.
I don't, that's all, if you,
Well, I mean, we gotta be more explicit about our transfer. Like,
yeah,
so let's, a little, I want us to go slow to make sure we have everyone on the same page, exact understanding, so. Let's find a system to come back and see which I'm.
so during the, during that time frame between the effective date of this act and that July 28 assumption of jurisdiction, DEC is going to report to you on their progress in preparing for transfer of the jurisdiction of the dams, and that's page 59, lines 12 through 19. And then on page 59, going on to page 60, notwithstanding the effective date of section 18, that transfer dams to jurisdiction, the PUC shall retain jurisdiction over dams within its control as of July 1, 2024, until DEC assumes jurisdiction of each dam as required by subsection A of the section. While the Public Utility Commission continues to exercise authority under 10 U.S. Chapter 43, as it existed on June 30, 2024, the CUC shall apply the dam design standards rules as adopted by DEC. All right, page 63, we're going on to development. And that is a proposal, I think in agreement with by the agency, I think in agreement with the advocates that would, in the prohibition, they would provide that unencapsulated polystyrene and open cell beaded polystyrene would be prohibited. So no person shall use unencapsulated polystyrene, open cell beaded polystyrene for the installation of a new buoy, dock, or floating structure on the waters of the state. So the concept is that that prohibition will be prospective and will not require AR to do enforcement of any existing unencapsulated or open cell beaded.
It's right. Mr. Overstreet, you're on the phone, can you? You're working on this language, no. Agencies. Is this a change that you're support for?
Yes, good morning, Chair Bray, members of the committee, Mason Overstreet, Conservation Law Foundation for the record. Yes, Ms. Smith sent this language over yesterday and we're completely okay with it and recommending it to the committee, so thank you.
There is one.
Emergency permit, no.
Right, the one remaining major change, and it's really still issued. Page 68, line 19, section 29, going up to page 69. This was the language requested by the agency to allow them, notwithstanding the requirements for public notice, and comment for any permit that during a federally declared emergency or state of emergency issued in response to a natural disaster, Secretary may issue certain individual permits and notices of intent. The general permit that's emergency permits according to the type 5 procedures, which are the emergency procedures. It only applies to approvals governing activities that are necessary to respond to the conditions created or caused by a natural disaster. But it also applies to support response and recovery efforts to alleviate hardship and suffering of citizens and communities, or preserve public health and safety and property of the state. So I've raised many questions with the agency about this. I don't know what a natural disaster is. There are multiple different definitions of that, specifically federally. I don't know how long the state of emergency will last for. I don't know what permits will be issued. Is it any permit that A&R issues other than the ones that require specific public notice and comment under federal rules? Where does the agency get authority for emergency permits for every one of its permit programs? Because statute only provides for emergency permitting in a few different permit programs. Most of those permit programs that have emergency authority are already listed under 7716. We don't need to list that that's what the notice is going to be again. And then that phrase, to support response and recovery efforts to alleviate hardship and suffering of citizens and communities, is sufficiently vague and ambiguous to let them do whatever they.
Yeah, I would prefer we just take this language out now.
I'm content with the same. Too many big questions to extend. And between here and the finish line, there'll be opportunities downstream. It turns out it's more proven than the Zoom. We'll have an opportunity to bring amendments before, learn more and know. But give it for council's concerns. Agree.
So it won't be in the next grad.
Yeah, so is Mike, did you hear that?
Okay.
I'll move the gravel and the opportunity.
Great.
All right. So, yes, anyone disagree with the notion of taking out this provision? Parties for reinstatement at the moment, but I want to be reinforced. It's entirely. Yeah, but we'll leave it alone. Okay, so thank you. Thanks for moving through it at a pace that's yet from one to the other. And we have a number of different things flagged that require more discussion. We also have, thank goodness, a weekend. So my thought was that
I'm so looking forward. And I'm so looking forward to the weekend.
knowing you attend yesterday, that you didn't know what you were gonna do with all the spare time you have. Only someone would come up with a helpful suggestion.
Thank you.
You could post. No charge, actually. I would suggest, all parties and the committee spend time, reading through and talking with folks that you want to consult with, and that we, reconvene next week in Fisher Cut. I've talked with enough people, will just be sufficient time. And because we're moving on to we don't have time. Push back next week's schedule. Moving on to 258. Efficient. So my suggestion will be that we have a meeting Tuesday afternoon. sort of late meeting. We sit down with advocates and the agency. So it'll be in a certain way informal intercommittee time for hashing out positions. It's not a formal meeting vote, but at least if we have, just want to have a place where people have a back and forth with advocates as opposed to doing research one by one, and we don't have a conversation. So that more people can make a meeting.
I guess Tuesday, yeah, Tuesday, what day?
Tuesday.
Afternoon at what time?
I like it, you know, like 4:30. People have finished afternoon committees. And then we would sit down 90 minutes and have a conversation with parties about the outstanding items. I have 4 flags here. There could be more. Say,
Mr. Chair, if I'm understanding correctly, you'd like to have a non-committee meeting where we're making decisions about what's in.
with, thank you. Just trying to provide a way to have a conversation with all parties and that people can ask questions, have some back and forth. We'll need to make formal positions amended formally and voted later. We don't have an opportunity. I don't want to give up enough committee to go through everything, but we're trying to move to another bill. And I get it. We didn't have drafting, we didn't have editorial services at the evening. Mr. Grady will only in 15 minutes. I'm just trying to figure a way to have a little more discussion. How
It's a discussion, a meeting, a hearing, a what? If we're going to do it, it has to have a.
We will, so we'll take this up on Wednesday to a formal discussion and vote. Okay, see, let me back.
Okay,
I'm gonna have a meeting with anyone who's interested in this plan at 4:30 on Tuesday. In order to hear more about where things are. If anyone would like to join that supplementary opportunity to have more discussion, great. If you already know where you're at, you know where things are, it's fine. And then on Wednesday, we'll do it and more. So it's just trying to create space for more discussion in case people want to have different points of view in a room. And have an extra 90 minutes to do back and forth.
Will the machine be on and people be listening?
Should be.
yeah, I guess.
We're gonna have a board.
Okay.
Yeah,
Make a suggestion.
sure.
You as a committee chair, as a courtesy to the chair of finance and to expedite this meeting. You might ask her to please make sure we're adjourned. I can find support, because otherwise, nearly half of that committee is gonna walk out. Which will make her like, or we'll stay, in which case, yeah, in case more than half this committee is not here,
So,
including the chair.
So
Mr. Chair,
there's all the chairs between that I have.
Oh,
yeah, that's, okay. Mr. Chair, so I have some concerns about that, and personally, I don't need any more conversation on the points that we have up for discussion, the ones I flagged.
Yeah.
Unless there's some late breaking news about river corridors not being as much of an issue as they were during the summer floods. I don't think that'll happen between now and Tuesday. I'm also concerned because it feels that I feel that we have made changes that we haven't discussed as a committee. And I worry that there will be a new draft Wednesday morning coming out of this Tuesday meeting. Is that the intent? Is that there would be a new draft based on the conversation that happens on Tuesday? And if so, could we make it a formal committee meeting if that would be the plan? I would feel better.
Okay.
Because if there's no new draft coming out of it, great, then I'm fine to show up on Wednesday, but if the plan is that you would be taking consensus and making a new draft, I don't feel comfortable having that not be a committee meeting officially.
So,
Does that make sense?
yes, for sure, let me. My thought with the resolution of the open item. Like things flagged today. Would take place at a Wednesday regular committee time meeting
So there
prior
would,
to a vote.
so there would not be a new draft coming out of the discussion on Tuesday.
No, I might, I think. So we have a couple places in here now where there's like a double set of language, right? And
Yes.
So having things written down. I think is helpful because we're gonna have to literally. Compare something and make a choice. Or in some cases, it's just a question of modifying a date.
So that's what we'll do on Wednesday. Okay, so it feels like the Tuesday meeting is in case you are undecided about some of the sections, you would come.
Exactly.
Okay, and that is very helpful, so I don't think I put into attendance on Tuesday. If you do choose to make it an official committee meeting, I will come. But where I stand, I think I've kind of made where I lean on all of those things, and at this point, based on the date changes, I don't feel good about the draft, and I would not be in favor of it on Wednesday.
I think probably. We haven't had an opportunity to have a conversation.
Yeah.
So. Let's, I'm sure that, so. Good to know where you are. Thank you for being expensive. And,
So we just Wednesdays,
so, well,
discussion and vote.
yes, so the second half of Wednesday will be. Discussion, final edits, vote. Sermon comes.
So I'm looking at the history of the PUC and wondering if they're just sort of being drafted to do something that they've never done before, that's not in their area of expertise.
I'm not sure if I'll, because we're transferring things out.
The notion of the three members of PUC being in charge of dams. I guess it's like me suddenly trying to raise giraffes on my farm.
Well, she's not the committees, like we do have lawyers. Maybe you could help us clarify. My understanding is, we are removing obligations from the PUC that they currently have to regulate days. They're transferring them all.
Yeah.
The agency effort will go. So some
The
suggestions.
PUC.
Yeah, I'm not talking workload, I'm talking area of expertise, that's.
Well, they do this now. They do this now, sort of thing.
And to look at us.
Your metaphor is creative and vivid, but I think it's actually misplaced.
They're
Right, the PUC,
doing so well, why are we here?
Well, I think the general thought was that there's a much larger game program that we're, with oversight of in the neighborhood of 1,100 dams. PUC has 21. And so I think sort of feeling so why have a split system? Why not bring all the dam safety work, not one, the Mr. Green's program? And the question was the timing of the transfer of things, how people over. No, but I think if you have concerns about the PUC regulation, then would. It's not going to be reassuring is the move out of that rule. And regulate for energy generation, but not. Ultimately. Or James be taken over by FERC. Mr. Carpenter.
Jared Carpenter, Lake Champlain Committee. Mr. Chair, for the interested parties, stakeholders around the room, what would you like in terms of We have flagged a few areas going through where there are disagreements between the agency and the advocates. Would you like us to put something together for the committee? I'm just trying to think how we can be helpful to present our point of view. Obviously, we'll be in attendance on Tuesday, sure, and Wednesday. But prior to that, what would be helpful for
Well, I
us?
think we have any time right now. And
Yeah, could we, I mean, we can make some decisions.
we have, other, we don't have our lawyer to capture any drafting decisions. But if we're making decisions, we can flag and communicate them to Mr. Grady, which happens routine. So if people are, again, I would propose we use, and we still have to go back to the flags right now to see if we can resolve.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chair.
If there are still things open. That's why I'm thinking of grabbing Tuesday.
I love that you're working for consensus. I feel, I keep using I feel, but I think we just need to make some tough decisions.
Well. Sure, you know, I have. Let's go item by item. We don't need to care if it's tough or easy or
We can
whatever.
make decisions that some groups would not be. That someone will feel that their perspective is not fully being articulated.
Sure, so why don't we go through? I have flags, you have some stuff.
Yes.
My first flag is on page 20.
Oh, well, I just wanna start by saying, I have ones before that.
Yeah, sure, whoever, so item by item.
I just wanna say the findings, thank you,
Well, you're.
well written. I don't know where they came from, but
They.
they're great.
The page, they're modified from page 29 from a year.
Well, thank you for doing.
Yeah, well, it was. We've been talking about climate change, it's the driver of the whole bill. It's related to it and. Just.
Yeah.
For non-community members who might wonder, I don't know that anyone wonders, is this real? But I think having some. I also reached out to Mr. Farnham yesterday and got a response that would provide us more data on damages, and so. Between now and a votable copy, I thought I might look at trying to add more from specific data related to 2023. Or if we just convert forward of people. Anyway, we're gonna have more data now than.
And I just think on page 2 where you say, according to DEC, 70 to 80% of all flood related damages occur in Vermont's river corridors. I think that that's crystal clear and I appreciate that. So I guess my first flag, and what's confusing to me is because we moved the river corridor section, I can't quite find the original point I made in section, what is now section 3, but the first one is the timeline.
2027.
Is now 2027.
Page 3.
Yes, and I don't know what page it was on the previous draft, but it was 2025.
Rivers, corridors,
It was-
forward.
I would call it previous back to.
Yeah, I don't remember what if it was.
So the rivers corridors moved because. Council, we don't have that, the findings even. Adjacent to a section, they did the things. We had river, they were. I think the rational.
Yeah.
So.
We could share.
Anyone who finds that same section in draft 9.1. That would be the most current thing in front of us.
Just trying to, yeah, I'm trying to keep track. So we had it, we had it January 15, 2025 in the previous draft, is that what we had?
For the education outreach report,
Yes.
the previous draft. Draft 5.1, page 10, line 13, on or before January 15th, 2026.
Okay, it was 2026. I would, prefers to return to 2026.
And I'm trying to make sure. Hey, that's,
On my way back to the page where
On the current draft, we're on page 3, line 21, and then the previous draft, I think we're on page 10. But yes, I think,
I don't have the previous draft in front of me. This deadline, so this is a reporting deadline that would be intended. Currently, it's in the previous draft, it was slated to take place halfway through the outreach portion. The agency's proposing that it takes place at the end of the outreach portion of our report or group. The agency's concern was that we will only have partial data collected 1 year in. Well, primarily we'll be doing infill mapping.
Yeah,
And so the concern was that there wouldn't be a comprehensive report to bring back after 1 year. It makes more sense to provide the legislature an update after the full outreach and education has been.
and then also, but does that then affect why you've chosen to extend all the other dates out?
That deadline is no, okay, short answer, no. The other deadlines are for different reasons, but this was specifically that there was a feeling that providing a report after only 1 year mapping and outreach wouldn't provide the information the legislature was looking for.
We did ask about that, the last draft, to Mr. O'Grady, and he said the intent of a midway point was to allow an update to the legislature halfway through the education and outreach, which is why I think the previous draft had a 1 year advance of when that report would be submitted back to you all.
I think I'm comfortable with the report deadline being changed. I had thought that the change was made and was kind of the waterfall effect of the other dates being pushed out, but it sounds like those are separate conversations.
I mean,
And we could have this reporting deadline be later, but we could still do the rulemaking at what the previous draft did. They're not connected.
right, so what's my understanding was that. The process having gotten underway and just being focused on implementing that. The very little information to report. So that was our.
Yeah, as long as,
Otherwise, this seems a bit of a pro exercise.
I'm less concerned about that and more that if we were going to change all of the dates. So it sounds like we can change this date for the reporting, but not change the other dates. Okay, so I guess I'm comfortable with that.
Well, if I go from there, my next is not still.
I have a flag on page 6, which I think is which is the other timeline section, I believe. Which is to this conversation. The dates that they would like to push back the rulemaking.
Yes.
And I would like to go back to the previous draft dates, and it sounds like we can have the report. And the rulemaking as separate conversations. Not as one.
So, you, where, so that I,
This would be
Here
page
is two
6 on the new version on line 10,
of page,
6. In draft 6. And then I haven't found it in the previous draft yet. Yeah, so. Might be page 17.
definition,
Oh.
Before that.
the heading is that the code rule. Now, rules. Okay, so the page. They're on page 12. Of the 5-1 draft.
Oh, okay.
You're on 5-1.
On page,
In order to see old dates.
Oh.
yeah, so we had it originally as July 1st, 2027. And I think we even had sooner than that previous drafts, but maybe I'm mistaken. And so in this new draft, it's January 1st, 2029. I respect the point that Mr. O'Grady made about rulemaking and the extended time it took for the Lake Shore piece, but I am not. I just think 2029 is too far out. And I,
For the,
that's.
for the rule. There's also pre-rulemaking work, and I wanted to pause. See if pre-rulemaking is. Ms. Smith, can you speak to sort of some mapping period, a public education outreach period? The rule begins. Can you say anything with these new dates, what's happening in the time period compared to the original date 27, compared to a rulemaking 29? What's happening in 27, 28 under this, the agency's proposal?
Sure, the dates that have not changed from draft to draft is that beginning in January 2025. We do the updated infill mapping and outreach and education. Both drafts have that extending from January 2025 to January 2027 in both drafts.
Okay.
And then we report back either midway or the end of that period, but either way, we report back to the agency what we're learning as we conduct that outreach and mapping. With a rule adoption date of, was it July 1st, 2027? There is essentially no pre-rulemaking. We would have to, upon like at the end of the outreach period, we would immediately have to start formal rulemaking. At which point the ability to modify the language in the rule, it is there, but it's limited to the extent that once you notice a rule, you can't modify substantive elements of that language in the interim. So under the agency's timeline, we have an education and outreach period. And then we begin the pre-rulemaking process, which essentially means we take the applicable standards in a preliminary draft form out on a roadshow.
So what's the outreach and education then?
Outreach and education is largely just informing people. Well, I guess I'm a little bit ahead of my skis here, saying exactly what that would look like. That would really be Rebecca and Rob who would be conducting that, but just education regarding the types of, well, it would be linked to the mapping. So the mapping identifies infill areas suitable for development, and then it would be information sessions with those communities, informing them of what new regulation on development would look like, what may and may not be allowed. The pre-rulemaking process is more like, this is actually an applicable standard that can go into effect here. This is what it would look like. It's just a more granular look at what that regulation would impose on the community and give them time to formulate feedback and provide it to the agency before we actually file with the Secretary of State, that formal rulemaking process.
I'm having trouble remembering what rules that came to Elkhorn not that long ago. I haven't had an extensive pre-rulemaking phase. It was in essence public outreach and education. Because when we put out a first draft rule, then that evokes a lot more response than just we're thinking about mapping and we do better. So the experience that I had with that rule just it wasn't in any way an avoidance of ruling. It was just a longer period for the rulemaking. You give people a look at the first rule, then you have the ability to modify it. And but you have a lot of conversation that precedes the publication of the first draft rule in formal rule making, which by the time you're that far along, it's like more constrained. It's more detailed development, and it's a more mature rule. My take was if it's helpful to the rulemaking, do it over a long, do it in pieces, pretty rulemaking movement. And we weren't giving up anything. We were actually providing a longer period of time for the public. I don't know, sitting down, you can think of what rule that came through that had a long gestation period.
So this is 4 years of public outreach and pre-rulemaking and rulemaking, right? And what is the typical timeline for a rule? Is it 4 years?
It's where the administration is in a hurry to have one or.
I mean, I'd say a pretty a fast turnout around on the rules, practically a year. But I would say with natural resource issues, it's all substantially longer.
So 4 years is a normal amount of time.
But I don't know if I've worked with it's normal.
Or is that in?
I would offer that.
Water quality rules, and we've had like a 19-year gestation.
It very much depends on the scope of the regulation, whether it's something has been implemented in part before, or whether it's a new rule, whether it's something that it depends on the number of landowners that it would affect, the number of regulated entities it would affect. There are different examples of different technical rules that then require extensive feedback from like industry professionals. Dam rules being one of those, the stormwater management manual, for example, the update to that. And it really, the pre-rulemaking extends over many years as we gather information from neighboring states around stormwater management methods. So I would say it really depends on the nature of the rule. It's hard to define timeline for a standard rulemaking process, just given the scope of what the agency does.
And the point the agency is making is you do not think it's possible to achieve the public outreach.
I think that the agency is concerned about the level of interest that will be generated around this rule and wants an opportunity to actually provide opportunity for feedback statewide, given the scope of this rule. And the number of properties, I think the projection of 45,000 properties that would be subject to regulation under this rule. That's substantial, and it's substantially more landowners than were affected under the Shoreline Protection Act, which that's Mr. Grady remembers very clearly did take 4 years to develop and you know outreach for.
Did they do outreach before they did the rulemaking?
There was no rulemaking, that was actually a statute, so it took 4 years of debate in the it took 4 years of outreach and then conversation in the legislature to finalize the language that's now in the statute that regulates shoreline. So different process, but a similar amount of time spent basically doing outreach and soliciting feedback from constituents, both on the part of the agency and legislators who are working on the language.
So the other piece, so there's a practical side of a long, complicated rulemaking involved more properties than anything else I think ever done by rule. And there's also our conversation with the EJ. So I'm thinking about three public health and safety. To manage a transition to better rules and practices, ASAP. I'm also conscious of the ability to do it well and the ability to engage all parties that are interested. One of the EJ surveys we've heard repeating this, that one of the notes in our memo that we got on Monday, EJ office, is about is their concerns about inadequate staff, inadequate time. So I think I'm right. If we're gonna have a sort of a sea change in terms of more regulating, let's let's have a robust plan that lets us proceed with some confidence. When the earlier days, when we have heard the office doing the work, those don't seem like achievable dates. We get good dates in law, but their professional assessment, they believe there's a complete government by the date. And I know that it's trying to say we're pushing hard on it. I'm happy to push hard, and I want us to do it in a way that supports everyone who's doing the work. That gives them a chance to deliver the best outcome. So, I don't. So I think they have a little. I'm thinking about all that interpretation work and wanting to make sure we do it well.
And I think for, oh, sorry.
Yeah, pardon me, but Mr. Chairman, you sound terrible.
Was it?
You sound terrible. Your work ethic, I respect, but I'm wondering if we should adjourn the meeting
Yes, do you want to?
and you go lie down someplace because you're.
Yeah,
This is medical question.
That may be the part that makes screwed on it.
yes, that's a great idea, and I know that some folks on the Zoom were having a hard time
Oh,
here.
yeah. Here, okay.
No one will fall.
So, how about we adjourn on the Tuesday, meeting? But let's figure that out a little bit, I'll stay together. What are people feeling? I was just trying to give us an extra space for
Sure.
conversation that wouldn't take away from many times, because I'd like to see us get 3 bills beyond this bill, 3 more. So these 2.
Whatever you want to do,
All right,
just.
so let's.
We'll make up the
Yeah.
lost time. We will make